me just walk you through this model in a little more detail. Self-awareness, which is the foundational skill of emotional intelligence, is the least visible, but I think it's the most important. If you're not self-aware, you'll be very poor at managing yourself. And if you're tuned out of some range of your own experience, you won't pick it up in other people, which is the core of empathy, which I think is the real basis of relationship skills. So self-awareness, in terms of how aware you are of your emotions, has to do with just more than knowing your feelings. It's how they impact your performance, and also knowing what your strengths and limits are across all of these abilities, and even better, knowing how other people see you. All of those are signs of a high self-awareness. And when it comes to resilience, sometimes called emotional balance, it has to do with how you manage your own disruptive feelings, whether you recover quickly from upsets, whether you can stay calm in crisis. This is very important for leaders because in any crisis, everyone looks to the leader to see should they be upset too. And if a leader's panicking, then everyone else is not going to feel very good about what's going on. I remember a wonderful book, Only the Paranoid Survive, by uh, Andy Grove, who was the CEO who built Intel into a dominant company back in the days of the laptop computers. He said, there were two times Intel could have died as a company. And what mattered for survival was how top management handled their own emotions. If we had frozen, if we had denied, if we had panicked, he said we wouldn't be here today. And in fact, resilience in neuroscience is seen in terms of how quickly you recover from the peak of upset. And it's been shown by Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin that there's a circuit in the left prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center, just behind the forehead, that manages upset. And people who recover most quickly from being upset, it turns out, have 30 times more activity in this circuit than do people who just don't recover very quickly. So self-control or resilience is crucial. Adaptability, these days sometimes called agility, being able to shift as demands change. Interestingly, in our own research, my colleague Richard Boyatzis at Case Western Reserve found that up to 30 years later, people who in college and in their MBA programs have been found to be highly adaptable now showed the most career success and career satisfaction, and very interestingly, I think tellingly, the most life satisfaction too. Then there's achievement, here sometimes called grit these days. It means you keep going to that goal despite setbacks. Interestingly, people that are high in this competence look for feedback. They want to know how I'm doing so they can make a mid-course correction if they have to. They take smart risks, but they really do the research before they take what looks like a risk to other people. Finally, there's positivity, all these days also known as a growth mindset. You see the best in people and in events. You have an optimistic outlook. You believe people can grow and improve. And of course, in training and development, that has to be a core belief, a core attitude. Then let's look at the relationship cluster, social awareness and relationship management. There's empathy itself, and I think empathy matters more than ever in the workplace. One reason is diversity. You're working with people, or your customer base or client base is made up of people whose background is different than your own. And it takes empathy to sense how they're going to react, how they think about things. Also, when it comes to getting people to give their best effort and motivate them, which is, of course, a competitive advantage, it takes empathy. And then there's mergers and acquisitions. There was a large pharma company. I remember this data, very amusing. It bought a company, a smaller company that had a 90% market share, and in 1 year took it to 20%. The CEO was really indignant. He demanded a study to see what had happened. And what he found was that those integration managers who handled companies that were acquired during the first 18 months, some had sterling records and some had terrible records. And the number one difference was the empathy of that leader. Then there's organizational awareness, knowing how to read the dynamics of your own organization, knowing, for example, who makes decisions, particularly decisions that affect you or that you might want to have input into. And then let's go over to influence there, which has to do with how well you can not only persuade the right person, but first, of course, you need that organizational awareness to know what person to try to persuade and how to build buy-in from key people. And then there's coach and mentor, and for training and development. I think this is really important. The reason it's in this model is that we feel that if you want to take training and development to scale, you want everyone to be a coach and a mentor. You want everyone to have that attitude that the people that their direct reports, everyone can get better because emotional intelligence is learned and learnable. And you want people to have the skills of coaching and mentoring because that is going to mean that even if you can't touch people, they can. And we find that coaching boosts all the other relationship competencies. So then let's go to conflict management. This means that you can help others through tense emotional situations. You can bring disagreements into the open. You can tactfully find solutions that everyone can endorse. And you can acknowledge all sides, but redirect the energy to a higher ideal, which gets us to inspire, where a leader can articulate a shared vision or mission or purpose from the heart that speaks to the heart of everyone else. This lets you get the best out of your people. They want to give their optimal efforts, but it takes that ability to articulate that shared purpose beyond day-to-day tasks, not task-focused, but meaning-focused. And these are the bosses we love, people who we see as inspiring. In fact, I've seen research that says leaders who are high in this ability are seen by their direct reports as highly effective. And then, of course, there's teamwork, which these days is how work gets done most everywhere. This ability to work effectively with others toward a shared goal for a leader means, for example, creating an atmosphere of respect, of openness, of cooperation. And leaders have unstated task in a team of setting norms. I remember talking to the director of one of the national labs. He had 3,000 or 4,000 PhDs working there. And he said, whenever someone brings up a new idea, a creative insight, we have an unspoken norm, which is that the next person who speaks has to be an angel's advocate. He says it's all too easy to be a devil's advocate and talk about why it won't work. But new ideas need that support at first. So that's an example of a norm. He said, I don't know who set that norm, but it's spread everywhere now. And some of the best work on teams is being done by another colleague, Vanessa Dreskat, who's at the University of New Hampshire. She's found through very thorough research that there's a group level emotional intelligence that teams exhibit. And the more emotional intelligence a team has, the more productive they are by whatever metric applies to that team. They not only establish norms that help them, they're very open about member strengths and limits. They have a high group self-awareness, if you will. They also have empathy at the team level, which means that they can see what other teams or other parts of the organization need, particularly those they depend on. They have group level empathy. And they name problems so they don't simmer and explode. They're very good at conflict management within the team. They surface differences and settle them. And interestingly, they celebrate wins. They know how to have a good time together. So they get into a group flow. So that's just a quick overview of the emotional intelligence model that Matt and I and the others we work with find most useful in training and developing leadership